All right. Good evening, everyone, and I'll call the meeting to order for the Wellsprings Unified Union School District at 6:02. First order of business is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Ryan, second by Courtney. We need to change the agenda a little bit. We have our attorney, Chris Leopold, that will be joining us about 7:15. So we need to have an executive session when he shows up. I don't know where that'll be within the meeting. So I guess when he comes on, we'll just have to just take care of that then.
And that's for legal communications, attorney-client.
Yes. Yeah. So essentially, we'll probably have the executive session in the middle of the meeting, I guess. It just depends how far we get. So any other additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor, say aye or wave your hand.
Aye. Aye.
Motion passes unanimous. General public comment. We have public here and online. If you're online and you wish to speak, if you can type in the chat your name and that you wish to speak. And if I guess did you want to speak tonight or?
I just assumed it's not.
No, that's fine.
With distance.
Unless I think we're on the agenda.
Yes. Yes. Yep. Okay. I don't know if anyone online wishes to speak or if they've typed. So I wanted my computer so I can.
Sorry. Yeah, I'll let you know if there's somebody.
Do you want us to speak now, or what works best for you?
I would say that if you want to speak now, do it now, because the attorney-client executive session that we're going to have later pertains to some of the legal questions that we have in store for our attorney. So if you would like to do so before that happens, I think that would be best.
Okay. I don't see everybody that is on the board there currently.
Amanda, Meredith, Courtney, Ryan.
I think Jody just logged in.
And Jody is here. Okay.
George is the only one.
George.
No, George is not going to be here tonight.
Okay. Well, if you'd like us to speak and sound-wise, would you like us to move forward? Or what?
Yeah, you know what? If actually you just want to come over here, that way we can even get you on camera. I apologize. It's not
Sure.
If you want to actually just you have a seat right there. I can do it. Sure you. I just.
So I'm Anne-Marie Maher, and this is my son, Philip Maher. We had presented at the September board meeting in regards to Philip choosing a path through flexible pathways and doing early college. I had sent the board a little bit more information about how flexible pathways tie into early college and kind of the state statute that governs that. Also the cost breakdown for local schools and the cost breakdown as I spoke with Lois after the last meeting. What he was speaking to as far as the funding that was kind of set aside for Philip to attend his senior year at Rutland High School. And as a result of him choosing the early college pathway or being selected to do that at one of the 6 early college institutions in Vermont, that the lack of roughly $11,000 that would be coming to Middletown Springs, but there is an offset then of $5,700 that could be utilized to meet the state statute that states that the board could approve the money to be utilized for the board. That is really all about the equity and accessibility for these newer forms of educational policies. And I'm not, did it get, I apologize, I don't believe I sent it to you, but I'm assuming that.
No, Eric
it will-
forwarded it to myself.
Okay,
So
okay, sorry, I did not do that, so you have access to that information. I did contact the kind of chief financial manager through the Agency of Education, and he also felt this was a fair utilization with the state statute for the money for this early college program. So I don't know if there's any other questions that we can offer answers to at this time.
Okay. Well, we'll be talking more about it later in the agenda. And so I think if more questions come about, then I don't have any further questions. So
Would you like us to stay to if after? I know you said legal counsel is at 11 or 7.
yeah, I mean, you can stay up until then.
Okay.
That would be
I didn't
fine.
know if you needed us back.
And then at 7:15, when we go to executive session, what we can do is there's a room that we, if you want to stay till after and we come back out, you can come back in. So.
I mean, I don't want to stay.
Okay. You don't have
But
to.
if you would like us to stay
Well,
to
I think it's
answer
really up to
questions,
you.
I'm happy to do so.
Yeah. I mean, that's up to you if you like to stay or not. So you're more welcome to stay. But...
Okay. We'll see.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So if there's no further public comment, I don't see anything in the chat. We'll move on to approval of the minutes. Motion would be in order to approve the minutes from September 1st.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
For a second.
I'll second.
Motion by Courtney, second by Ryan. Any changes, corrections? I didn't see any. Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye or wave your hand.
Aye. Aye.
Motion passes unanimous. Approval of the warrants. We have warrant 189 and 191. Is there a motion to approve the warrants?
I'll move to approve the warrants.
Second. Is there a
I'll second.
All right. Motion by Amanda, second by Ryan. Any further discussion about the warrants? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the warrants, please say aye. Wave your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Got a yes, Amanda?
Yeah, sorry, I thought I raised my hand on here.
All right, motion passes. Superintendent's report.
Thanks, Erica. A few items to discuss. Okay. All right, I have a few items to discuss. First, we have finished up with our NWEA max testing during the fall assessments. I think I'll let Rick and Liz kind of talk a little bit more about that during their presentation. But they said this baseline data will give our school teachers, administrators a good opportunity to kind of see where our kids are at and adjust the the learning for them as we move forward to the winter as well. But like I said, Rick and Liz will have a little more detail about that. So I want to talk a little bit about COVID updates. As you know, we past couple weeks we have had some cases within our communities. So in the Well Springs district, we have had 3 positive COVID cases that we know of. We have heard of 2 additional cases as well, but not impact school because individuals were outside of school when they got tested positive. So there were a total of 5 cases, but 3 that's what in school. As a result, we had 3 classrooms had to quarantine, 41 school community members, both students and staff, had to quarantine as a result of these positive cases. Rick and Liz and the staff continue to look at the AOE, Department of Health, the American Association of Pediatrics, and the CDC recommendations around student safety, make sure that all these conditions are in place. There are a couple of things that we're still working on, particularly one being surveillance testing, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But if you have any questions about any of these safety protocols, mitigation strategies and measures, please reach out to Liz or Rick at your respective buildings. You may have heard last week, Secretary French had pushed back the masking recommendation to November 1st. It doesn't really impact Wells Village or Middletown, considering where we're at with the vaccines right now, but the date has been pushed back. And looking at just the data, people believe that would be another further pushback until Thanksgiving, but we'll have further information on that later. Last week, Secretary French and Governor Scott talked about testing options in our schools. I just want to kind of go through this with you. I know that since that has been kind of brought forth to the public, there has been some clarification in regard to the school nurses, to the superintendents, to the principals, that these are 4 options. They're not mandatory within our schools or things that we want to take a look at. We do know that in our schools across the SU in Well Springs, the issues that quarantine have placed upon our students, our families, and so looking, projecting forward in terms of how we handle this and least disruptive, we are going to take a look at and explore some of these testing options. So the 2 options have been divided into 2 categories: response and surveillance. So I'm going to talk a little bit about response first. The first one is the one that most of us probably heard a lot about. That's the test to stay, or the rapid antigen test. The attractive thing about this testing option is it takes care of or a lot of the issues surrounding quarantine for our schools. So in the situation of, say, like in the past, where you had like a 2-3 classroom who positive case for the community, that whole group would have to go out. With the rapid antigen test, what would happen is if we find out, say this afternoon, that there was a case that would identify all the students in 2nd and 3rd grade as close contact, instead of keeping those students out for a minimum of 7 days with the negative test and up to 14 days, and looking at having them at home and being disruptive, the antigen test would allow them to come back the next school day, take this rapid antigen test, which is something similar like a Binex now, you see at Walgreens or things along those lines. And after 15-20 minutes, we would have either a positive or negative test. If a child tested negative, they would go right to class and be off on the day. The expectation would be that student would do that for the next 7 days, and then after that 7th day, they'd be fine. They'd be back in class. There are some logistical concerns with this, some staffing concerns that we talked about today with the admin team, with the school nurses, particularly around staffing of this in terms of just how we handle this. Let's say like last week we had 40 individuals out in one building. The following morning, what does it look like trying to do a rapid test for 40 individuals the next day? So that's not a reason for us not to do it, but we just have to take a look at how we can safely do it, efficiently do it, because our goal really is to get kids back into school and return to in-person learning. So this is something which we are exploring, we are looking to do, but like I said, we're working on logistics on the back end for this. I know there have been some questions about, yes, Jody, go ahead.
So whenever there was the outbreak at Middletown, we weren't supposed to test our kids until like 4 or 5 days later on that Tuesday. How does this work differently? Like, how is it that we're able to test these kids the very next day and we don't have to wait for that, incubation period or whatever?
Sure, Jody, that's a great question. I'll explain that. So currently, right now, we have when a student is identified as a close contact. So, we're not going to talk about the student who tested positive or the staff member or whoever might be tested positive. So let's say, a student has been identified as close contact. According to the Department of Health guidance, we build out what's a day 0, a day 7, and a day 14. So we look at day 0, and day 0 is identified as the last known point of contact that the individual had with the person who has tested positive. So that day 7, you may find that's when you get a phone call. Day 7 may really be 2 days from now. It just depends on when that last point of contact is. So it's a little bit tricky that way because it's not. It really depends on where we build out. So let's say yesterday was the last day of contact. So we build out 7 days, which would be next Monday would be your day 7. And so on that day 7, as a close contact, you would be allowed to go get a test, a PCR test. And once you have that negative test results, your child can then return to school. So typically that's going to be on day 9 or day 10. The issue, and this is, like I said, the current quarantine, this is what we've been doing, since last year. With the antigen test, what's different is that, your child still identifies as close contact. You have the option of doing the antigen test. Now, you don't have to. So a family member says, I don't want my child doing antigen testing. I'll keep them home to quarantine. And day 7, we'll go get the PCR test, or we'll just do day 14. But if the family wants to do the antigen testing, what will happen is, set it up, is that very next day you go in, you take the rapid test, and the rapid test, if it shows negative, your child will be allowed to go to school. And that's with the understanding that they have no other symptoms. So they're asymptomatic, a close contact. They're negative, then the next day, so Friday, they would go back and they would do another set of testing. So each day for 7 days, they would be negative testing, but allowed to go back to school. Yes, Jody.
I guess my question was how is this test? It seems like this test is better or different than the PCR test that I gave Lily and Tyler, because I needed to wait 4 days to go get that test done. Does that make sense? So,
I don't know about better or different. Like I said, I'm not a medical professional. I think there are, it is different because in the past we have talked about antigen tests not replace PCR tests. PCR tests are still seen as the most accurate form or indication of this. What they're taking a look at is an individual who's been identified as a close contact who has no symptoms. So it'd just be like, let's say my daughter has been identified as close contact. She's fine, no symptoms. She could take the antigen test, and the antigen test basically test to see if there's any traces of COVID or in the system. She tests negative, she's fine. Then you have to do it the next day. And then if she does it the second day, she's fine. She's going through it. After 7 days, they've found that there would be no need for continued testing. Then we're back into school. So there would be no need for my daughter to stay home for 7 days. We'd just have to take this test. This is what the state is promoting. Now if we don't want to do that, then we go back to just our normal quarantine for 7 days, and the 7th day then to go get tested and bring them back. So it is, like I said, being promoted, being prompted as a way for students to quickly return back to in-person learning to lessen the disruptions that are currently being caused by quarantine. I know we have a couple, I think there was, somebody else had their hand up, but maybe not.
I did. This is Ryan, but I think you answered it for me, Chris. I just was trying to clarify. So for that 7 days, they would have to take a test for every day that they went to school within that 7 day period. It wouldn't just be the first test and they'd be done, right?
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's kind of the difference. Then I think that was what was the missing piece, Jody. I think that was the difference, is that it's not just the one and done. They'd have to take it every day, and if they got clear, then they could be in school for that day. But the next morning, they'd have to get that done first before they could go to class. Is that
That's correct, yes. I mean,
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
yes.
Okay, I
it's
just
a-
want to make sure.
It's
Thank
not the
you.
one done. It's a 7 days of this antigen testing. So if, and another question was like, well, what happens over the weekend? Let's say, they do 5 days of testing, then there's a weekend, you'd have to do it on Monday. So it would be, that would be fine. So technically it's the 8th day, but that's just kind of how it works around. But we would communicate that with the parents, how that would work. It really just depends on when it falls. But like I said, the goal of this is to get the kids back in, so they're not missing any school. And then what will happen is obviously if a student, would test positive on a rapid test, then we would contact the parents and they would have to come pick them up from school, and then we go through the next steps, which is a positive. But there's gonna be some other things we'll talk about PCR testing. That we also want to have availability of PCR at a school, so a family would not necessarily have to try to go and find a place to set an appointment. That we would have an option that's the family could do a PCR test right at school. We then submit to the lab for them, so that we can get the results a little bit quicker. Because we do know, we know that all our schools, that's been another big headache for families, is not just scheduling, just trying to find a place, because, or the drive or whatnot. We've heard that some people have driven, better part of an hour and a half to try to go get a test just because of where, the availability. So, the PCR testing would allow us for that as well. Okay. Amanda, you had a question?
Yeah, do we have a connection to get like those Binax Now tests? Would those be provided to the schools? Because I know those have been pretty limited too. Would we be able to get enough tests?
Well, I mean, there's always a supply chain, concern, but the state has, said that they will have tests provided for us. So they'll be, deliver them here to the central office, and then we'll be distributing them on an as-needed basis from here. So that was a question that was asked in terms of will there be enough, but we were said we're not to worry about that. We should be okay in the initial run. So, and we know that Abbott and other labs are producing these, because I think it's something that's being done in Massachusetts, out in Utah and Connecticut. So I think, like I said, there always is a concern about supply chain, but I think it's one where, as we see, it's not going to be a daily occurrence, or should not be a daily occurrence for us. It really is in the event of, if we have a positive case in our community, and instead of, putting half a school out, or, a grade out, that we will, we have an option to get these kids back in, so families can have a sense of normalcy, can get to work, and the students can get back, to in-person learning with their classroom teacher.
Yeah, I think it's a good option. I just didn't realize that the state would provide that. And I know, like, if you or I were to just go into Walgreens, you could only buy like 2 or 3. So I wasn't sure that, I didn't realize we could get multiple.
Yep. The state has discussed that they will be providing us with this, so, and helping us with shipping and things along those lines. So, are there any other questions about the test to stay? We have a couple, workshops coming up around this. As we have more information, our goal would be to have some information out to the communities by the end of next week regarding these. We still have to work, like I said, work through logistics with Rick, Liz, Jackie, and the staff. Because, like I said, it's, our goal is to be disruptive, but we have some ideas about how we're going to help with this. Myself, Lisa Madison, Christine Cam, central office. We will be deployed to assist with this, these sorts of things as well. So it will limit disruption. So we have some ideas moving forward. I did a couple of other response testing. We're just about the PCR, and I think it's, just said before that the state has discussed, make a PCR test available for schools. I'm not going to get too much into that, but I think we are going to ask for PCR tests to be available, because like I said, we look at our communities, particularly with Middletown, Wells Village, and the accessibility sometimes of testing, and PCR in the case it's needed is not always readily available or convenient. So if there is a situation where we need a PCR test, that we would have that availability, that a student or staff member would have access to that at one of our facilities. We'd be able to ship that out and get those results back to you. All right. Vanna, do you have a question again, or?
I did, sorry. Is there any plan around if a kiddo tested positive for COVID, say in October or November, there any plan that if it were to be in their classroom in December and they were still testing positive even without symptoms, would those children be excused? Because I know that they were saying kids can test positive for a few months after.
So, I mean, can you repeat that, Amanda? I'm sorry, I cut off there, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. So my children were positive in August, and our pediatrician said that they can be positive for 3 to 6 months. So is there any plan for a child who had tested positive but had completed their quarantine and was symptom free but may still have a positive test if
Yeah,
they contact again?
I mean, you know, man, I can't speak specifically on that. Like I said, not being a medical professional, I do believe that when we have students who, you know, or individuals in our buildings who have tested positive, we do keep close track of, you know, medical conditions and what may happen. We do understand that there may be traces moving forward. So that I think we'll just handle that on a case-by-case basis, and we'll just work with the families on that as well. But I know that medical professionals, you know, while they're some of them still test positive 3 to 6 weeks, they also believe that they're not technically infectious at that particular time. So, but you know, that's a good question, I think. But you know, Jackie Becker, you know, the school nurse might be more equipped to answer that. But like I said, I think we'd handle that on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
The last testing, which is just option, is the surveillance testing, and we have been discussing this. And I think this is one that we talked today about bringing this in. This is a weekly optional, you know, it's completely optional, voluntary. So students and staff can opt in. They can also say, no, thank you, we're okay. But we provide a weekly, you know, PCR test, you know, just to, and we're looking at the week of October 18th to bring that in. It'd be very similar to what we had in place last year for staff. Like I said, it's a purely optional testing. So for families who would like to have their child get a weekly test or a staff member, that's great. If family says no, thank you, then that's fine as well. So, but that's something we are working on. But we could potentially see the surveillance testing phased out, particularly if we have the test to stay, the antigen testing, and the PCR available. The surveillance may be eventually phased out later in the fall, but it is something which we are exploring. We were looking to bring back. There have been a lot of issues from a tech end with the surveillance testing. I know a lot of schools were supposed to start 3 or 4 weeks ago, but the company that has been contracted to work with us had a lot of problems with their platform, and things have been kind of squared away now. So now we're back up in line, and we're getting things ready to go. So that's kind of what we have for surveillance testing and you know, testing options for COVID at least this week. The other information here is just about the, you know, professional learning day for staff on the 8th. I think we'll have more about that during the November board meeting, but just gives you a brief overview in terms of what that entails. We'll have a little more detailed plan for you, because I know that the boards do like to hear what goes on during those days, what sort of learning our staff are kind of, you know, what's taking place and what they are doing. Just also want a reminder that on Monday, on Observance of Indigenous Peoples Day, there will be no school. And the last thing that I have in the packet is just a review of the GRCSU strategic plan and portrait graduate update. This is something which is going to be done SU-wide. We have a group called Battelle for Kids. It's coming in, meeting with the program lead or program director tomorrow to discuss a timeline. But what we'd like to do is, as an SU, really kind of get back and develop like a 5-year plan. Also look at a portrait of a graduate. So we have an idea about what an ideal graduate or a student who would matriculate through our SU would look like. The nice thing about this company, this organization, is they're going to do a lot of community-based work where they will be working closely and asking people from Middletown, Wells communities for feedback. They'll be setting up. Initially, it was slated as in-person. Depending on how things are within our respective communities, it might be in-person meeting, it might be a Zoom or a Google Meet. But like I said, all stakeholders will have an opportunity to participate in this at some level or another. And at the end of this, it said we should have an SU-wide strategic plan, which would provide us a new vision, new mission, which we feel that all stakeholders will have an opportunity to kind of have a voice in a say in, which I think would be great for us. And the last part, like I said, is just more for informative purposes for the board. It's just a list of the leadership team workshops and professional learning initiatives that Rick and Liz and the other administrators in the SU will be going on and taking over the course of the year. Okay. All right. Are there any other questions? Thanks.
All right. Well, if there's no further questions, we'll move on to the principal's reports. Rick.
Right here. Good evening, everybody. First, I'd like to thank all parents and staff for Middletown Springs having their first COVID case. And unfortunately, it happened at 2:30 in the afternoon. And I appreciate everyone, parents and staff, and working together and getting through it. And so at this point, we have most of the kids back. So I appreciate everyone's help. It has been certainly a very interesting start to the school year, and I appreciate all the help with staff of covering. At this point in time, Kelly subs are thin defined, and so I appreciate everyone's help in covering positions and still providing good academic experiences for all the students. A couple of the big things that we are working on, and I want to go back to the WARE grant, which the whole point is this collaboration between services, schools, and parents to help meet the needs of our students. And one of the things that we're working on this time as an SU, which started through the WARE grant, is a social emotional screener, which is really a tool, and I want to say a collaboration between everyone on making sure that we're meeting the needs of the students. The SU, Middletown Springs Wells, will be doing the screener in October. Information will be going out to the parents so they know what the questions are. And really, it's just to get a read of what's happening and how schools can support our students. Another area of focus is that Vermont has health standards, and they certainly recommend that a comprehensive health plan is very important. It's the best way to teach health. We have the Great Body Shop, where we have it now. We had a late start and bring it to the school, but we'll be sending more information out to parents. I think clear communication to parents know what's in the health curriculum. And I think it ties very nicely with the Vermont standards, but I think very transparency and communication with parents. But I think this is another tool of trying to working towards meeting the needs of the students. And yeah, and we're working together on jump rope, and more information will be coming about that, especially as we get to parent-teacher conferences and the first report marking period. So it's been a very busy first month of school, I have to say. So certainly any questions?
Any questions for Rick? I had a question about this new health curriculum. It says K through 6th grades. I would imagine that's age appropriate.
Yes, it is. But that's, once again, that's why I want to make sure parents are aware of it, know what's in the curriculum. And actually, it's really designed for pre-K too. We're looking at a pre-K, adding pre-K to it. So really, it's like, for example, the first month is safety. And so for each grade level, it's based on that theme. And the good thing about the curriculum is that actually we can tie in PE, we can tie in health, we can tie in counseling. So each classroom teacher would teach 4 lessons a month, and then involve the nurse PE in helping to support the curriculum. So it really is. I love the fact that it's a very tied in, connected, and there's actually a role as a principal, and food services can tie in all the areas.
Thank you. Liz?
Good evening, everybody. You have my report in the packet, and I can answer questions on that as well. I'd like to kind of piggyback off of what Rick said. It was a very busy month. I think it was a great month. We had a lot of active, engaging lessons, kids meeting their peers again, and just building that community as the school year opened. And we did purchase the Great Body Shop as well. And we are taking a slower approach to building it in, but it will have the same kind of outcomes as Middletown, where social emotional counselor, Jackie, food service, all of us are kind of wrapping around to go through and provide these opportunities for the kids. And that's something that I know Rick and I were really wanting to be consistent on as we are working under the AWARE grant with that lens as well. So I wanted to mention that we have revamped our PBIS approaches in the school. We were afforded an opportunity through the AWARE grant to purchase new signage, which has started to show up. So we've got some really nice banners that have school expectations on them, visible when you walk in the door, in the cafeteria, on the playground. Mr. Hathaway has been hanging them up wherever we find the most appropriate wall space, and really just trying to live and breathe our expectations with our students. And we have gone to more of a communal-based recognition system. So each classroom still has the ability to earn their PAW points for their class on the 100s chart, where they can celebrate as a community. And we formerly had Wildcat Sightings, which was our recognition for students going above and beyond expectations. And we have moved to a system where we're using GEMS. And we actually decided this afternoon as a staff that we wanted to call them Wildcat GEMS. And students are still acknowledged for those above and beyond expectations. And we have found positive in verbally acknowledging the student and handing them this gem to make that connection with them and to praise them for their good work. And then we are taking those from the classroom level and putting them into a large community jar, which is right outside the office, with the intention that once that jar is full, we are able to celebrate as a school. So we are almost full already on that jar, a few weeks into school, and that's really, really positive. So it tells me that kids are doing their job, teachers are recognizing students, and we're going to be able to continue our community building, even though we're still relatively isolated in our classrooms, unless we're at lunch and recess. So really proud of the work that folks have done. And then Mr. Saul was mentioning maps. We have finished all of our maps, and we're starting to work on our Fontes and Pinnell reading assessments. And we have a meeting next week during one of our PLC times with a supervisory union literacy coach, Lindsay Ryder, to review some of that data and to take a deeper dive into our tier 1 practices and to see how we can continue to support kids. So really impressed with the work that we've done so far this year, and looking forward to continuing to make some significant growth.
Thank you. Any questions for Liz? Go ahead, ma'am.
I had a question, and I should have mentioned it when we did the agenda. I apologize. I'm not sure if either school has had the chance to think about 4 wins for our kids this year. I had a connection with a couple of people through 4 wins, and I've got some information email I really meant to share, and I had forgotten until tonight. But if either of you guys think that it's something you're interested in, I'm happy to forward to and help make that connection. I've spoken with a couple of people who may be interested in volunteering, but I thought that it would be really good, given that they're doing most of it outside this year. They're offering winter as well. I thought, especially with COVID, it would be a good start to get the kids back into something else that they could do outside without their mask and stuff. So
I appreciate that.
Forward that to you. I've done some digging.
Absolutely. We had a contract in the works last year, and then we had to take it back, just given where we were as from a health and safety standpoint. And we have had that conversation, but I would love to know who you're connecting with so that we can continue to make that happen.
Okay, absolutely. I'll forward that on to you later tonight or tomorrow.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
And Amanda, if you have something for Middletown Springs or some connection, please send it on.
Yeah, absolutely. They actually told me that we could do together Wells and Middletown, and it cuts the cost in half. You can use the same program, the same people, and split it between the two schools. So
That would be great.
I'll send it to both of you in the same email.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you, Rick, for your extra hours with the COVID cases, and happy birthday, Liz.
Same to you, Eric. Happy birthday.
All right. Finance.
Good evening, everyone. I have a couple items on the agenda tonight. The first that we can go over is the ESSER update that was included in the package. So this is a one-page document which just gives a brief summary of our ESSER funds that we have received to date and what we've spent to date. I did give a report at the SU board meeting with the same information, and now it's just working its way through the local board meetings. So on the sheet, you can see that we received two different grants, ESSER 1 and ESSER 2. ESSER 1 we received and we started spending in January 2021 after our CRF funds ended. The ESSER 1 grant is $446,000, and we use it for an array of different things, but mostly building-based subs to help with the unanticipated absences on a daily basis, as well as technology needs, some professional development. There was still some expenses going towards items like PPE, social distancing materials, and items that were needed because of the pandemic. As of the time of this report, which was a few weeks ago, we had $347,000 of the $446,000 spent, which leaves a balance of about $100,000. Of that, most of it has already been allocated. It just hasn't. We have not paid for it yet. The plan is to finish this grant out in the next couple months and concentrate more on ESSER 2. ESSER 2, which is on the bottom of the page, the ESSER 2 grant is $1.6 million. This grant we didn't start spending until July 1st of 2021. The first expenses in this grant were the summer enrichment programs that you saw in many of the schools across the SU. Each school was able to submit a proposal on enrichment activities they wanted to do for the summer, and then they were allocated those funds. In addition to the summer enrichment, there's money for continuous of building subs, again, to fill on unexpected vacancies. There's also several new positions that were hired at the SU to concentrate on our recovery plan, including a literacy coordinator, a data manager, a SEL coordinator, which deals with behavior. And then there's a few open positions that we're still looking to fill, such as a pathways coordinator, an MTSS coordinator. And these all are part of our recovery plan. At this time, we anticipate using ESSER 2 funds throughout this current year and into the beginning of next year. When ESSER 2 runs out, we'll start spending ESSER 3, which is the latest of the stimulus packages that we received. ESSER 3 is almost doubled. ESSER 2, it's $3.6 million. And so we'll spend ESSER 3 for for about 2 years. We'll have to spend it after we start using that. And our plan right now is to continue focusing on our recovery with those funds. So we'll continue the positions that we started, continue with building subs, and things really that will focus on recovering and not dealing with the pandemic, but recovering from it. The plan is that all the money that we're spending with these ESSER funds are items that will, by the end of the funding, those positions will either be absorbed in. They won't be absorbed into the local budget, but there'll be items that we no longer need. So we'll be working on plans to transition out of those positions. That about covers it. If there's any questions, please let me know. The second item is FY23 budget timeline. So that was included in the packet, and we also went over this at the SU board meeting. So there's two columns on the budget timeline. The first column is the supervisory union budget, and then the second would be the district budget. So both timelines are pretty similar, but the district one lags the SU one by about a month. So during the month of October, for the SU timeline, we started the budget process in September with reviewing the timeline, going over budget parameters, starting the budget discussions. At the October board meeting for the SU, we'll present the first draft of the budget. We'll get board feedback, make any changes that are needed based on the board feedback, and come back in November with a second draft and hopefully the final version of the SU budget, which will be approved at the November board meeting. This way we have final figures that we can use in the local district budgets. The district budgets, including Wells Springs, we start the process today at the October board meetings, where we'll review the timeline. We'll have a brief discussion about the budget process, see if there's any board feedback on budget parameters, things they'd like to see in the budget, or changes that they'd like to make in the budget, things that they would like the administration to research data that they'd like us to collect to come back with, either in the first draft or second draft. And then we will present that first draft at the November board meeting. We'll look at a second draft in December, and we'll look for a board approved budget at either the December or early January board meetings. After the budget's approved, then we shift our attention to getting ready for town meetings. So it's putting together the annual report, getting information for the town reports, putting presentations together for PEG TV, sending out mailings, just shifting over to PR to get the information out to the community so we can get taxpayer support and get our budget approved. Any questions on the timeline? And then if not, I'll just open it up to the board for feedback on the budget process itself, or items that you want us to consider in the budget first draft that you would like us to come back with.
No questions for Lewis? Now, as far as the budget goes, if I recall correctly, the last couple of years we've generally created just basically like a level funded budget, Lewis?
Are you referring to the first draft or yes, in general?
Usually the first draft.
Okay. So is that what you'd like to see for the first draft this year?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of
towards a level funded budget.
Yeah, it was more like a question. I mean,
so typically what we do is we create the first draft based on bringing back all of our existing staffing. I meet with the principals to get their feedback on the needs of their buildings. And then we put together the best budget we can based on the needs of the buildings. And then we present that to the board. With the budget presentation, there'll be usually the first page, which is the summary of changes, which will show all of the changes that have been included in the budget. And then any larger items that will have a major impact on the budget, they may not be included in the first draft, but they'll be included at the bottom of the summary of changes, which will be items to consider. So, for example, if one of the principals has asked for another staff member, which potentially has a large impact, We may not put that in the first draft if the budget can't sustain it without being close to level funding. So we'll put that as an item to consider, and then we'll have those discussions with the board during the presentation of the first draft. And then based on the feedback from the board, we could include that. And during that feedback, on the summary of changes, I'll include what that cost is, what the impact would be to add that position.
Okay. Amanda, you had a question for a split second, maybe?
I did. Sorry. You said additional teacher, and I thought that was a great thing to look at what the cost might change with that. And is there any way, Louis, that you could kind of let us see if there's any funds left that we could put in for some other I'd like to see if there's any way we can come up with some money for other activities for the kids. Obviously the education stuff first, but if there's any money, anything we can look at for offering kids some more activities. We have the after school program, which is great, but if we could get some, I don't know, like there's cooking classes and there's 4 Winds, like I mentioned, and there's other programs and GISP that we're looking at and those kind of things. If you could maybe show us what those options might look like, if there's anything left over.
Well, both schools have money in their budget currently for enrichment activities. Usually it's under instruction, professional services. It's usually a couple $1,000 each year. I know especially last year, a lot of that money has not been spent just because of the pandemic. But there is money available for the principals to work with outside vendors to bring in either artists in residencies or do activities, professional developments, anything that would increase the enrichment activities in the school. And the summer enrichment activities that occurred this past summer will continue for the next few summers as well. That'll all be grant funded. And we sort of put together this summer's activities really quickly just because we didn't find out exactly how we were going to spend the money until late in the year. But now that we have more time to plan for next summer, we're hoping to be able to bolster up those programs and offer more than we did last summer's. And some of the programs were pretty good at some of the schools. They varied by school, and some were definitely offered a lot of activities.
All right, thank you, Louis. I think seeing a first draft might be valuable to a lot of the newer board members. Kind of start this process. So I guess, as you said, after meeting with the principals and seeing what the needs of the buildings are, and maybe coming up with a level funded budget to start with might be just a good starting point. That's my thought. If any other board members have an opinion.
I agree. I think it would be good to start with the level funded, and then after we hear from the principals as far as their needs, I'd be curious to hear from Liz what the plan is for the future. I know we had discussed doing the siding on the back side of the school years ago, and we were going to do it in increments. So we did like the front many years ago, 3-4 years ago, and then we were going to do the back. So I wasn't sure if that was in the future and if we should set aside some funds for that or what Middletown might need. I think that might be a good idea to discuss those two.
That definitely is a great question and segue. So one of the items that we'll discuss during the process, and we can touch on it a little bit tonight, and we'll discuss it more next week. So Wells brings it in with the surplus, and so we'll discuss how we want to handle that surplus. We have 2 options. One is to give it back to the taxpayers, and it'll go in as a revenue, and it'll reduce the education spending, which then reduces the tax rate. The other option is to ask the taxpayers to approve us spending those funds for a specific purpose. So we would have to put an item on the ballot, And so for one item that we've done in the past is asking them to permission to put surplus into a capital improvement fund. We do know we have some capital improvement projects coming up. I think there's painting that needs to happen in both schools. I didn't know the Middletown, the old part of the building. We discussed that during our principal meeting. The old part of the building needs to be repainted, and it's quite a big project because of the age of the paint. So that's something definitely we want to consider in either the budget or in a separate line item on the ballot.
And also, maybe changing class sizes that are coming in if we do need to add a teacher to some of the, either building or both buildings with changing class sizes with the combining of classes. I don't know if that's something that needs to be looked at because some of the other classes are larger that are coming together now.
I mean, I'll leave that to the principals to, I guess, to review. And if they feel there's a need for that, then they could let me know and I could add that to the budget.
Just to add, that's part of the consideration. We want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all the kids and academic needs. So
Thank you, Rick.
All right, if there's no other questions for Lewis, you think you have what you need, Lewis?
I do, yes. I'll put together a budget and we'll go through it in detail at the next meeting.
Thank you very much. All right, contracts. Everyone have the contract recommendations? See some heads nodding.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Meredith?
Why do we have two different amounts for the substitute teachers? One is MSES local substitute, one is MSES building substitute. There's two different hourly rates.
Good question.
Louis, you want to address that or you want me to? You're muted, Louis.
So our typical sub rate is $12 an hour. That's what we pay our local subs. The building substitute rate, we just increased to $13.25 an hour. I know last year we paid $13 an hour for all subs just because of the emergency situation. I guess I would need to discuss this internally to see if we're doing the same thing for this year to make all building subs $13.25. But the $12, according to our procedure, $12 is the normal local sub rate. $13.25 is what we approved for our building subs. Those are the ones that are being paid with grant funds.
Well, I would hate to lose a sub over that, especially since she's a retired teacher.
I agree, and we're short subs anyway, so I would say make them.
I would agree. We could bring this up to $13.25. I think it was just pulled from our current procedure because of the position, and we can correct that.
Thank you.
I had a question about the after-school program coordinator. Last month, we approved a different after-school program coordinator at Wells Village Schools. So we have 2 of them.
So what, we had to make a shift with pre-K. And so the individual who was working with who was the after-school program coordinator is now assisting with pre-K. And so had to leave this role. So therefore Liz had decided, said she'd step in and assist after hours with this.
Okay, that makes sense. I just, I wasn't sure. I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
all these hourly extracurricular contracts and stuff are getting hard to keep track of. Would it be possible to, like, if there's a change in that, to maybe note a change, like if someone's no longer an after-school program sub, and then we need to approve another one, maybe make a note of that? Sure. For future contracts. Okay.
I have a question on the water systems operator. This is just a quick question. I'm assuming that our new head maintenance guy is not licensed water system operator. Is that correct? Okay, perfect. Just wanted to make sure.
And did we, I don't remember, I don't have it in front of me right now, but did we approve the other, did we had another after school substitute? Did we approve them at the same hourly rate? I thought it was different.
All after school personnel are $15 an hour, and then the coordinator is $20 an hour.
Okay.
All right. If there's no other questions, what's the pleasure of the board?
I would move to approve the top 2 rates, the 1325.
Okay. You're talking about just for support staff?
Yes.
So you want to approve the 2 support staff positions for local substitute and building substitute for 1325.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Are we doing this as two separate motions? I'm sorry, I just got
Yes.
confused. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Any further discussion on the support staff contract recommendations? Hearing none, all those in favor? Please say
Aye.
Meredith? Okay. Any no's? All right, motion passes unanimous. All right, now for extracurricular.
I'll make a motion to approve the extracurricular as stated.
I'll second.
Motion by Courtney, right?
Yes.
Second by Jody? Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimous. All right. Okay. Wow. Time that just right. Okay, so everyone received we'll move on to old business with the out-of-district tuition request. Everyone received the letter and the request in their emails and read through it. Okay, and so essentially this came to the board and we had a discussion, and then it went to the SU, but now it's back, and basically the policy F9, everyone read through that. I don't know, Chris, did you want to talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, so there was a request by a staff member to out of district, who was out of district for their child to attend at the SU meeting back in, I do believe it was August. The board had said no to the out of tuition request at that particular time, or out of district request that time. Then staff members asked take a look at F9, which is the admission of non-resident tuition students, which is the appeal to if we have a spot and the family is willing to pay tuition, whether or not the board has the ability to approve that. The local board has the ability to approve that. I think that's where we're at right now, is back to the local board under F9, which is a tuition-based request now.
So can I just get some clarifications on this, because I'm confused? I know that we had discussed it and that we really wanted to accommodate the teacher, but we were concerned that the supervisory union would not approve based on utilizing a spot that would be filled with a potential other kid from within district. So I think, if I remember correctly, we were going to send it back to the supervisory union for discussion. So what happened at the supervisory union meeting?
So the request was denied at the supervisory union meeting, according, and so then the request was, and looking at F9, which is looking at admission of non-resident students, where they're requesting that if there's a spot available and they're willing to pay tuition, would we be willing to do this? And that's a local district decision.
Okay, thank you.
Jody?
So I guess when I'm reading, I mean, F9, this isn't new, right? This isn't like a new policy. So the F9 was in place whenever we denied this. And when I read this, it seems, I read it as this should be allowed. Like we don't really have a choice in the matter. But maybe I'm just not, maybe that's just the way that I'm reading it.
Jody, right, the initial request was not regard tuition-based. This request is now tuition-based. That's why it shifts to F9. So the initial was not about this. The secondary request now is about the F9. So you're right.
Okay, so at first she wasn't wanting to pay tuition, and now she's willing to pay tuition? Is that what you're saying?
At first, the request was to allow child to attend school, and then it was denied. And then it said, well, if we pay tuition based upon the F9, and that's when we being brought back to the local board, because the board has the authority to approve that request.
Chris, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the initial request did, if I remember the letter correctly, did have a request to pay tuition if it was allowable by the board. If I remember correctly, but
Then I'm not quite certain why I got bumped up to GRCSU at the time, because if F9 is in place, then that would have been a local decision at that particular time. So
it just seems to me, based on F9, that if someone is willing to pay tuition, we're not allowed to not let them in the school. But am I not reading that correctly?
that's all right, that's correct. Yes, that's why the request is here, yes.
Okay,
And that's why we included F9. It was to just clear state that we do have a policy that discusses how to handle admission of a non-resident student who's want to pay tuition.
okay.
Amanda?
This child will be a preschooler, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought that our discussion within our preschool is that we allowed out of resident children without paying tuition, but that the tuition would be a discussion for K through 6. Did I misunderstand that?
I do not believe that was the discussion. So.
Jody?
All right, I do have one more question. I noticed that the letter reads 2021 to 2022 and 2022 to 2023. I guess my question lies in, are we able to make those promises, or does it need to be year to year based on, the kids within the district, assuming pre-K gets completely full?
So, I mean, I'm Jody, you're asking me, or are you asking the board? I'm sorry, I just want to make sure.
I'm just kind of asking whoever has the answer, I guess.
I would think if we have room in preschool, we can allow a preschooler to attend without tuition for a teacher. I think we've done.
Amanda, the GRCSU board voted against that. So this is why the tuition F9 allows for that. The GRCSU board voted that an out-of-district student not be allowed to pay without, particularly a staff member as well. So that was their ruling. So that was voted down. That's why we're back to the point where we'll pay tuition, and that's why F9 that would be allowed.
So, okay, so I guess with this, we are looking for a motion from the board to say that with tuition, we would approve that as long as there's room, this student could attend.
I mean, yes, I mean, it would just be the fact that this child, under prorated tuition, which, Lewis would work with that and work with the family to provide them with the numbers, what it would look like, and then that child would have an opportunity to attend our preschool.
Does anyone else on the board see why the child should not be allowed to attend if there's room in the preschool? 'Cause I would say it's kind of a no-brainer. If we have the room and they're willing to pay the tuition, we should allow the student to attend our school.
That was my question. I just wanted to confirm that there wasn't any type of waiting list for either school or any reason why we wouldn't have space for the child. I just wanted to make sure that was confirmed.
I do not have a wait list in Wells.
So if the board is going to consider this, they will need to decide what they want to charge for tuition. We do announce tuition for K through 12, and our K through 6 in Wells Springs situation, and our announced tuition is $15,000. The preschool tuition that's set by the state is only for 10 hours, but your program is more than 10 hours. It's full day, like kindergarten through 6.
And what is the tuition rate for 10 hours?
The state tuition for the 10 hours is $3,536.
And so they would just pay the difference, correct?
I guess I'm kind of confused about that point because I thought the decision at the SU board was that we were not going to allow out of SU students attend because then we would have to. One of the reasons behind that decision was the working with other SUs and then having to follow their billing procedures, their attendance procedures, and because of the wait list in some of our districts, why put that extra burden, as well as the burden of having to invoice for the amount above the 10 hours and those decisions that have to be made. So I guess I would need clarification if we were to allow this. Are we then saying that who's responsible for the first 10 hours, the 3,536. Are we saying Paulette's responsible for that? Or are we saying the parent's responsible for that?
Could we reach out to somebody from the BRSU and see what their take is and if they would be willing to pay a portion of it?
Well, Vermont has universal preschool. So, I mean, if we're allowing to accept the student, then BRSU will pay the first $3,536 for the 10 hours. We would just have to initiate an agreement with them, and then we have to just, based on that agreement, follow whatever procedures are in that agreement for attendance and billing and PD and whatever else is part of that agreement, like we do with all our other private providers.
Well,
Don't we already have an agreement with the BRSU for secondary students?
There's no agreements necessary for secondary students.
Okay.
So technically, as our board can decide what we'd like to do for Wells and Middletown, and then it would be, as far as the SU goes, based on each district, because if they don't have the room, then they wouldn't be able to take it. But if we said if we have the room, we could take the student that would not affect other schools within the SU. It would come down to, do you or do you not have the room? Is that correct?
Yes, the policy states that the member school district can approve this, which would be Wellsprings Board.
Jody?
I'm sorry. I'm still oddly confused about why, like, what this conversation is about, because it seems to me like F9 does not give us a choice, period. If a parent is going to pay tuition and there's room in the pre-K, we have to allow them in, period. We just need to decide how much to charge them. That's how I'm reading F9. Is that wrong?
So Jody, it does say upon approval, so the board has to say yes or no. It's not to say will, but so the board has to sit there and say, so there's been a letter, application, superintendents met those thresholds. Now we're at the board, and the board just basically has to just approve this, and a tuition rate established by the board. So,
but it seems like the only way that we can say no is if the kid got kicked out of a school, or they're, I mean, like, those are the reasons that we could say no are listed.
correct.
And they don't apply to a pre-Ker.
Correct.
Do we have to get that difference to get to the 15,000 from that family, or could we come up with a different amount? Because I think we had other preschoolers not pay and come, and that was fine. So as a board, can we decide that the 3,000 is appropriate?
That is a board decision, yes. The announced tuition, so the board has to set an announced tuition each year, but that announced tuition only applies for K through, in your case, K through 6.
Meredith?
How many hours is our pre-K full-time? Is it 25?
It's a full day, so,
It's a full school day. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's a
yeah.
full school day.
With early dismissal on Wednesday.
It follows the school calendar. Yep, follows the school.
So it just
So
follows the same schedule as K through 6.
So how many hours is that?
Basically 7 hours a day.
Yeah, 32, because with the early release, 33, 30, yeah,
32 or 33?
somewhere in that range.
And then you have the 10 hours that's being billed at around 3,000, you said, Louis?
Yes, 35, 36.
35, 36. So it really comes up to like 12,000 or more if you base it on that rate.
Are any board members opposed to saying our teachers, preschoolers could attend accepting the state amount of the 3536? And if you are not a staff member within the school, then we would have a tuition rate for the difference?
I think it's hard to say that not knowing, what the year-to-year requirements of the school building.
You're required to charge everybody the same amount.
Yeah. But you can't have different tuition rates depending on who it is. That would,
I guess I just feel like since it's preschool and we have those different rules around preschool, that the staff member should be allowed to bring their child to preschool and that be it. I think we've done that before. I think it worked okay then, and I think if it were K through 6, it's different, but for our preschoolers, we already have open doors. So I guess that's my thought.
I think in the past it was because it was within district was why it was not an issue, right?
yeah, within the supervisory union, yes.
Right, sorry. Yep.
How many weeks do the kids go to school? Ballpark?
36,
About
approximately.
36 weeks? Okay.
So if we said like 12,000, like Meredith had mentioned, and then less the amount that's provided by the state of the $3,000 number, that would be out of pocket for the parent of 9,000. Is that what you were thinking, Meredith?
Yeah, roughly, very roughly. But that's with the details filled in, that's what I was thinking.
I mean, do we have to set a specific amount? I mean, couldn't we just say the difference, from the announced tuition? Because it sounds like we're just trying to figure this up on the fly when this number, isn't really specific.
No, I mean, I think you could set an announced tuition rate and we can come up with an amount of like 12,000 or whatever the number that we decide. And then we would just say less the amount reimbursed by the state would be the parents out of pocket.
Yeah. Well, we already have an announced tuition rate.
Not for pre-K though.
No, but our announced tuition rate, the pre-K is what? The 10 hours you said is about 3,000?
3,200.
3,200?
So do the schools that have a full day program not get more money because they have a full day program? Their tuition rate isn't different?
That is correct. We receive the same amount of ADM credit, whether it's a 10-hour program or a full-day program.
So, I mean, around like $9,000, like Meredith was saying, if that was over the course of 36 weeks, that'd be about $250 a week, which is probably kind of what people would pay for childcare all day. I mean, I don't know how much. I haven't paid for childcare in a while, but how much would a family pay for childcare, for private childcare for a child for a week?
A lot.
About.
Probably that or more
Okay.
right now because there's just no childcare at all. And I think
So, I mean,
we have to take that into consideration too, is that there's just nothing, if she's willing to pay this, and I think we all kind of want to see her be able to bring her child to the school and
Right.
she's willing to pay it. I think you would probably be paying about $250 to $300 a week anyway at a private facility.
It is a luxury, and I know that there have been families in the very recent years that have moved their home in order to be in district and send their kids to school. So we can't, it doesn't make any sense to set a precedent. Sure, anybody can come and you don't have to pay for this luxury. That doesn't make sense. But, to me, it seems reasonable to pay around $250 a week, and then that'll be prorated, assuming this child starts now. She would only pay the whatever's left, the $6,000 or whatever for the rest of the year. That seems like a perfectly reasonable thing to offer anyone trying to get in the pre-K for any reason that is out of the district.
Amanda?
I think we have a hard enough time staffing our schools, and it would not be worth upsetting good staff that we have. I know there are other SUs nearby us that offer their staff tuition at like 40% cost for being a staff member. It's kind of a pro of being a staff member. Is there a reason we can't write that and say it's a new rule? Our, SU staff can bring your child out of district to our school at such and such discounted rate, and we allow her to bring him. I know in Pollitt, like if you were to get full-time daycare at like 150, 175. So I just think to expect her to pay $250 a week when what is she doing if we don't do that? Like I don't know. I guess I just feel like we have a hard enough time finding good teachers. She's not asking a lot. She just wants her child to come to preschool.
I would agree, Amanda. If the law and the structure of policy allowed us to just, let her go free, I would say, sure, let her child come free. We love our teachers, but I don't think the policy supports that. And so whatever we put into place right now, as far as tuition goes, has to be the same for, just any random person that walks into Wells and they hate the pre-K in their neighborhood. What I'm hearing is that we're not allowed to differentiate like that.
Well, I don't know why we because I know there's other BRSU. It's part of a perk of being a teacher with BRSU. You can bring your kids for 40% of the tuition cost. So why can't GRCSU say we do that and do that?
Oh, sorry.
Louis, do you know that answer?
If he's ready for us, we can.
I do not have the answer to that question.
Well,
All right.
for one thing, we aren't GRS. We're Wells Springs, so that would have to go back to the GRICSU board.
All right. We'll have to. Well, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Well, we'll have to postpone this conversation because our attorney's waiting for us.
Okay.
And he has a limited amount of time tonight, as I stated at the beginning of the meeting. So we'll pick up on this as soon as we come out of executive session. So what we'll do is I'll go ahead and make a motion to move into executive session for attorney-client communications, finding that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body or person involved at a substantial disadvantage. All the board members should have a separate link to the executive session so the public can stay in this Google Meets and we'll come back after. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
All right. And we'll invite the superintendent and Louis. Okay, there it is. We're out of executive session at 8:40 by consensus. So we will basically pick up where we left off on the agenda on the pre-K out of district tuition request. And I think it was Courtney who was speaking.
Yeah, I was quickly just running some numbers. And so I calculated an hourly rate of $8.89. So if you take the 10 hours that Vermont pays times 36 weeks, because I think that's what somebody said is how many weeks are in a school year. That's 360 hours a year. So if you take $3,200, which is the amount that's provided by the state, divided by the 360 hours, that comes to $8.89. So then I figured that it was 34 hours a week because there's 7 hours a day, but then the early release day is one short, so that's 34. So if you do 34 times 36, you get 1,224 hours. And then if you multiply that by the $8.89, I came up with 10,880. So I was thinking if we were to do like an announced pre-K tuition rate of 10,880, and then you subtract the 3,200 that you get from the state, that would be 7,680 out of pocket for the parent. And then that would be like 36 weeks. That's like $213 a week. So that was just something that I kind of just threw out there.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you. Amanda?
We don't get any other additional money for in-district preschoolers, though, right? That's what I was asking before we left. All of our other in-district preschoolers, we take that 3,000 and a bit.
I think that's my understanding.
That is correct.
Okay, so hopefully this isn't inappropriate, and I apologize in advance if it is, but right now we have a great student or a great teacher who is happy to be in our district and wants to be here. And I'm pretty sure we've had a substitute for a bit, probably because she doesn't have a place for her kiddo. So we're paying for substitutes.
Amanda?
Don't charge for any other preschooler to come. So why wouldn't for preschool we accept all preschoolers at the same rate?
That would be something that had to be considered at the board GRCS level about staffing and how we want to handle, staff children. So that'd be a separate conversation.
And wasn't that what was voted down at the GRCSU meeting?
Well, it was kind of referred to policy committee. And the reason why I went to the GRCSU is because of past practices. And then from there, after the discussion, it went to the policy committee. And then from the policy committee, it just came back here because of F9. So essentially, yeah, I could have skipped a lot of that, but I think some of that was overlooked. Ryan?
So I just want to, in looking at her request, she seems more than willing to pay for her child to attend. I think we're all, in the same, I think we all agree that we want this teacher at our school. And if she's willing to pay for it, I mean, not for nothing, but we have to pay for our childcare sometimes. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I don't want to see anybody pay more than they have to for childcare. I definitely understand the shortage of childcare providers in the area. I totally get that, but she has stated she's willing to pay. I feel like Courtney, that math you did was amazing, really impressive. And that's pretty reasonable, especially if we were to prorate the time that they've missed. So I guess I'm not sure why we're, hesitating to kind of go forward. If she's willing to pay, maybe we could just kind of take this to the next level and have that conversation about what the payments would be.
What was your number, Courtney?
So I came up with, if we were to do like an announced pre-K tuition rate of 10,880, and that's based on an hourly rate of $8.89. And then we would be reimbursed from the state 3,200.
Just to clarify, the state amount is 35, it's 3536.
Oh, 3536.
Yeah.
So that changes things. Okay.
And that would be prorated based on like where we are in the year.
Okay. And we're still good with the 36 weeks in a school year?
Yes.
Okay, so 3536 divided by 360 is, that changes, 35, 6, 60. So that's $9.82 an hour. So it's going to be a little bit higher than times 1,224. So that's back to Meredith's rate, 12,000.
Jody, you have your hand up?
Could you clarify specifically if it is okay if a reduced rate for staff children can be considered or not? I mean, is that legal? Is that an option or not?
Not right
It
now.
has to.
I'm sorry, what?
Not right now.
No.
That's something we'd have to discuss as a board and moving forward, but at this current time, we do not have that in place.
Okay. So I mean, based on that, I feel like if we're setting a precedent for general public, everyone moving forward, if you don't live in our district, we're going to have a payment expectation. We're going to have to.
So, Jody, we have a policy in place for that. That's F9. And I think that's what we go back to, is just that the admission of non-resident students, does state that tuition. I think that's it goes back to the crux of this, is the fact that we have an individual who is willing to pay for an out-of-district student. We have a placement. I think the board just at this time just approves, at the tuition rate established by the school board. I think that's what we're doing. So.
Right. Okay. But I mean, like, letting this person come at $3,000, the $3,000 that is already allotted to all other pre-K children, and then later on doing something different is not an option. So whatever is decided is what is going to be the policy moving forward. Correct?
Well, no, because we have a policy in place. We're not rewriting policy tonight. So that's what we have to take a look at, is if there is a change to a policy, we would have to go through the proper policy procedure. And
Yeah, I think it would essentially be changing this policy to encompass pre-K.
we have an individual, Sarah Bush, asked if she could ask a clarifying question. She is the individual that.
Yeah. I suppose that would be fine, since.
Sarah,
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry. So my question about the policy, just to clarify, is when we talk about out of district students that the policy is referencing, that's the Wells and Middletown district, not GRCSU
Correct.
family.
Yeah, we're concerned about that.
Okay.
So
I wanted to go ahead.
Yes, it is essentially for out of district, and that came up at the supervisory union. Are we talking about out of district? Or are we talking about out of supervisory union? And it was, oh yeah, we are talking about out of supervisory union, because as I'm sure you well know, other students have come from within the supervisory union So, yeah, Amanda?
Sorry, so I guess I didn't understand the answer. So are we saying that in this student's case, it's out of district because they're out of Wells and Middletown, or because they're out of GRCSU?
They're out of both.
No, I know that, but so,
So Amanda, in this particular case, they're out of both. So
but the policy states that it's a SU district rule, I guess, per se, or does it state like not supervisory, like just school district, like Wells Middletown? Because I feel like that changes it for me.
for this case, Amanda, we're dealing with this particular case here where the individual is a non-resident, both the SU and the, we could talk about the policy moving forward, but in this particular case, I think we have to focus on the facts at hand, please.
So on that note, what we decide tonight for this particular case does not have to be set in stone? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that, according to this F9, the board can approve admission of a non-resident student based on the prorated tuition. Yes. That's in keeping with what the policy states.
Okay. But if we said, okay, you can come for $5 a week because you're a teacher or whatever.
That's a tuition rate established by the school board, but I think we can't delineate between teacher and everyone else. If you establish a $5 a week, then that's the rate that you establish for everyone else.
Okay.
We can't establish a rate for one, not the other.
That answers the question, is that, whatever we decide on tuition, that is going to be moving forward what everyone is offered.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, is there any further discussion about this? What's the pleasure of the board?
I raised my hand. I do think it's an important question to get answered, whether or not you're talking about the supervisory union or the school district itself. And I think there's other cases.
I'm sorry. I meant for board members. Everyone, please. No.
I think, oh, go ahead, Jody, sorry.
It's okay. I mean, I would be comfortable. I would be comfortable just moving to approve this based on whatever Courtney, came up with as far as tuition goes. I mean,
Okay.
And I'd be willing to say that for preschool, since we don't get any additional money out of any other preschoolers, we could approve it for the just under 4,000 for preschool, but say that it's a year by year situation. And if there's not room, then we obviously can't take the child. But if there's room, we shouldn't charge another student, staff member or not, a rate that we're not charging all of the other preschoolers.
Okay, I'm not sure if that was a motion or.
I'll make it a motion. I make a motion to approve, allow the attendance at the 35 and change.
30, I'm confused.
The state rate, the 3,558 or 38.
Right here. This is the published state number for Middletown.
Okay.
If you need that.
I can't hear whoever's talking. I'm not sure who's talking, but we can't hear it.
All right. Let me straighten this out here for a second, because we have a motion to approve the student I will say admission request, but I didn't quite understand the rest of that, Amanda, because
My motion would be to approve the admission request at the state average rate, but not the additional amount adding in that hourly difference. We don't get any extra money from the other preschoolers.
yeah. Thank you. Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it is.
Well, I'm sorry, was someone talking?
No, I was just making noises.
Okay, so my question is also this. We don't, it seems like we don't get any extra money for the other preschoolers, but that's kind of ridiculous that we don't. Are we padding, that budget? Like if we really looked at how much we spent in that pre-K room, would it be well beyond that 3,000 or not?
Yes, your cost per pupil is a lot higher than the $3,536 that you're receiving.
Okay, and so do we know what the cost per pupil might be for a pre-K student?
I could let you know in a minute.
Okay.
So this our announced tuition is 15,000, right? Is that is pre-K through 6, correct?
No, I think it's
No, it's K through 6.
It's 15,000 for K through 6.
Because this says pre-K through 6 from the Vermont Agency of Education's website that Mrs. Marhart gave me. Is that from this year or is that last year? Yeah.
So the Wells preschool budget for this year is $111,000. That's just for what's isolated to the preschool program, divided by how many students do you have. I'm not sure how many students are in the program.
Does anyone know about how many students are in the program?
Yep, I'm just looking it up to confirm for you. 1 second.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were still in here, Liz.
By my count, it is 10.
And just to clarify an earlier point, if the board decides to charge $12,000 for tuition or any amount that's above the $3,500 for out-of district students, we'd have to charge that same amount for in-SU students as well.
Okay, say that one more time.
If the board tonight set a preschool tuition of whatever amount they decide, 10,000, 12,000, then we would have to charge that same amount of tuition to any other student that is attending the program outside of Wells Springs.
Louis, does Quarry Valley have announced tuition for pre-K?
No, they do not.
And no other pre-K in our SU?
There's only, I believe for the most part, it's a rare occurrence when we have somebody that's out of town that's attending one of our public school programs. We have waiting lists. The programs are usually full, and we have waiting lists just from town students. So there's usually not room for out of town students.
Haven't we had IRA students here before?
In Middletown, yeah, and we've
Yeah.
charged the state amount.
So just going back to Amanda, the kind of cost per pupil, it looks like it's about, even though we're getting the 3,000 or whatever the number is we're getting reimbursed or from the state or whatever, we're actually, we're actually paying 10,000 per student, per pre-K student, because we're padding it from other areas. So.
You mean supporting it from other areas?
Right. We're not running the pre-K on $3,000 per child.
And so just to clarify too, Eric's question from earlier, I have the announced tuition report that's on the State Agency of Education's website open in front of me. And you set a K part-time rate, which would be if you have a part-time kindergarten, you set a kindergarten full-time rate, you set an elementary rate and a secondary rate. You don't set a pre-K rate. This is part of the state collection. It lists the school, what the school is, like a pre-K 8 or a pre-K 6. But you're not, at that time, you're not setting a pre-K rate. You're only setting a K rate and above.
Okay, thanks. Amanda?
Louis, just to clarify, so when Meredith mentioned the our students to Middletown, we took those students for the 3,500-ish?
Yes, IRA students have been attending Middletown for the state amount.
I guess my motion still stands. I would say we accept him for the state amount and we make it clear that it's a year by year, change, as long as there is room. Obviously, if there's a waiting list or not room, we can't accept an out of district student. But if there's room, there's no reason they shouldn't attend for the same rate, especially if we've done it within another school. For not a staff member, likely.
Right. How were the IRA kiddos able to do that without it being an issue? Did the school board approve that? Or like, why is this an issue and that wasn't?
This was perhaps done when we were not a merged district.
They have been attending pre-merger, and currently the decision that was made was anybody within the SU would not pay above the state amount, because it was the schools and the district's decision to have a program that was greater than 10 hours, and that by charging any money above that state amount would then limit the amount of tuition students that could be not allowed to attend, but able to attend. And if there was room in the program and IRA students wanted to attend, that is generating revenue for the school.
But they were okay.
In addition for generating revenue for the school, it's also getting those students into the Middletown school who will then possibly stay for elementary school because IRA is full choice.
I'm going to second Amanda's motion.
Thank you, Meredith.
Excellent. I was just going to ask for a second. Amanda, can you reread your motion?
I'm sorry. I'm going to need that $3,500 amount again.
I would leave the amount out of the motion and just use the state tuition amount. This way you don't, because it changes from year to year.
Okay. So my motion would be to approve attendance of an out-of-district preschool student at the state average rate. And how would I say that how does that work now that it's not the first day of school, Lewis? How do I change that to say like prorated or whatever, right?
I don't know that you necessarily need to. Tuition is always prorated based on enrollment dates.
Okay, so a motion to approve the attendance of an out-of-district student at the state average.
Amanda, your initial motion was to approve the admission request, and the rest of that, I think we were talking about the monetary part, and so that's what I wanted to clarify.
Okay, so what are you looking for? A motion to approve the. I guess I don't understand what you want, Eric. Like.
Okay, well, I just wanted, you changed your motion at Meredith second. Now this is.
It was the state average. Is that what you seconded, Meredith? Yeah.
Correct. That's what I seconded, to approve the tuition request at the state average.
Correct. As long as there's room and not a wait list for an out of district student.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any further discussion?
I just kind of I would like to hear either Amanda or Meredith's kind of thought process, because I'm not settled on, if this wasn't one child, let's say like there are 11 kids in pre-K right now, I think it's full at 20 kids. If 8 out of district kids came to the pre-K at that $3,000, would we be able to sustain that on $3,000? Or would we need to have more like $10,000? Or do we think that that's never going to happen? So.
No, the program is designed to for a certain capacity. So it's going to cost us the same whether it's if it's 20 student capacity or if there are 10 kids in a 20 student capacity. You're not paying more substantially because of you're not adding teachers.
That is correct. 95, 98, 99, something like that % of the cost is a fixed cost.
So when we're looking at the pre-K budget, 111,000, we really shouldn't be dividing how many pre-K students are in there to come up with a pupil price. We should be dividing how many pre-K kids can be in there. So 111,000 divided by 20, that is the actual cost of each child. I mean, as much as I would like for, everyone to be able to go at $3,000 or at least teachers, I would love that to happen. Would we be able to sustain it if 9 general public kids came into that Wells Village school or at $3,000? And I don't think that we could. We would have to actually have, that budget. It might be like 7,000. It's not 15,000, but it's probably 7 or 8,000.
Would it change if the motion worded for staff? I don't think we can pick staff or community without writing a policy, so I don't think we can say that tonight.
I wouldn't.
And what about capacity? You take students to the capacity of the program in any given year, and then it's renewed the following year. It's in district placements first, and then first come, first served to capacity, to the existing capacity. The program was created for a bunch of reasons, not the least of which was hopefully to invite students to continue in our elementary schools. So it's not just about covering the money spent on them in the first 2 years. It's a community service to provide a high quality education for pre-K.
I
And I
mean,
think,
oh, sorry.
no, I was just going to say, isn't our maximum capacity 20 kids?
Yes.
So I think 20 kids. So as long as we're not allowing an out of district student to attend as student number 21, then it isn't going to make much of a change whether they live in Wells or Paulet, because a lot of our Wells kids go to like Leapfrog and stuff too. So if they all came to our school, it would still be more kids. So I guess I just don't see how it's changing it, because we're still not at that 20.
Right. If you take the pre-K budget of 111,000 and divide it by, 20 kids, if it was at full capacity, I mean, that's only 5,550. So it's about 2,000 more than, I'm not, these aren't exact numbers, but you're looking at, $2,000 difference. I mean, that's going to be a lot less than $200 a week. So maybe we just go with that actual number instead of just the average state rate, because the average state rate, because it is based on a 10-hour program.
But do you understand that then we have to charge anybody who comes into the program that amount?
Right.
But only if they're outside of the district, right? No?
Or if they're in the supervisory union. So that's where the GRICSU policy comes into play. So let's say a teacher who lives in West Rutland comes to bring their student to Middletown because they teach at Middletown. Now they have to actually pay that 5,000. Well, it'd be 2,000, I guess, because it'd be minus the state rate.
All right. Well, I'm going to call the question. Thank you, everyone. All those in favor, please say aye. Wave your hand.
Could you just restate the motion?
Yes, motion to approve the admission request with the announced tuition rate. I think I got that right.
State announced tuition.
State announced tuition rate.
Or out of district students.
All those in favor? Do you say aye or wave your hand? Any no's? Brian?
Sorry, I was talking my little girl in.
That's fine.
I'm gonna go with I. I'd like to see this get approved, so I don't want it to go into the next meeting, and I think that I'll stop there. Aye.
Thank you. All right, motion passes. Thank you, everyone. I think we need to do some policy work. Okay. All right. So next on the agenda is our student request. What's the pleasure of the board?
I'll make a motion to have Chris Sell contact the AOE concerning this matter and so we can get some more clarity.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Please say aye, raise your hand. Any noes? Jody, was that a?
Oh, yes, I'm,
Okay. Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Next up. FY22 school tuition religious school update. So I don't have it in front of me, but the VSBA sent out some guidance as far as schools with non-operating high schools, and in regards to paying tuition to religious schools. And as we did earlier this year, we went ahead and approved those tuition payments based off the discussions we had with attorneys and administration. So that's what I was going to ask. Did anyone see that memo from the VSBA?
Do you have more of a reference on which one you're talking about?
No.
Okay.
You know what? We can act this. We don't have to do any action on this tonight, honestly. I mean, we can table this. It's kind of an oversight on my part to make sure that everyone had that information. So we'll go ahead and go ahead and table this till next month. Like I said, it's not anything we have to take action on tonight. So I'll move to table. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion on that? Seconded that.
Jody did.
Jody and Courtney kind of sound the same. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Okay. New business. Pledge of Allegiance at our meetings. So kind of brought this up at the end of our last meeting really quick because 2 years ago, we had a brief discussion on it right after the merger. And I figured I'd bring it back up for discussion just to kind of see how the board thought about doing this or just continuing our boards without the Pledge of Allegiance. It's just something that I thought about a couple months ago. So we don't, you know, it can just be, we don't even have to like really take action. If the board is in consensus with it, we can add it to the agenda and do it. I think part of the discussion that we had 3 years ago was that there may not always be an American flag present. I think that's where it was just left. So, thoughts from board members?
I think it would be a great thing to add to our meeting. We go back and forth with agreeing and disagreeing, and it would be something to start off in unity. So I think it would be a great thing to have.
Okay.
Agreed.
Anyone else?
Do we need a motion to decide if we're going to start doing this or not?
I don't think so. We didn't before. You know, I just kind of just gauging the board and if and I guess if board members want, you can email me what your preference is, and I just think that we made it kind of a board decision before, and should probably do so moving forward. So, but if no one has any objections, I guess that would be the biggest consideration. Not hearing anything. We'll move on to policies. So, did everyone get the policies in your packet or read through them? I'll just talk about these really quick. This is just a first read. There were no changes to these policies. The policy committee just read through them and felt that you know, they were just adequate to continue the role of policy and policy dissemination and administration and review. And these are pretty basic policies. So if there's no questions on that, we'll have that next month for adoption. If anyone sees anything that should go back to committee, now would be the time to say something. So we just had that for executive session. This is just Chris, right? Was something else, but we'll save that for next month, honestly. Okay. We already had our executive session. Future meeting dates.
Hey,
November
Eric, I'm
3rd.
sorry to interrupt you. Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
Regarding the policy, I just wanted to throw something out there to the board members, if that was okay. I'm currently on the policy committee with Eric, and I'm just wondering, and this isn't something I need an answer on tonight, but just maybe to think about, if any other board members might be interested in filling in for me for the next 4 or 5 months, or maybe even just taking the role on the policy committee.
Amanda?
I don't mind covering for you, Ryan.
I think we've already just asked certain duration, considering the policies we'll be developing that it might be good to have someone just go now through March through the reorg.
Yeah. So that would be to take over, Amanda?
I'd be fine with that.
Okay. Are you fine with that, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, it definitely takes a lot of time and attention. So if you're willing to do that, Amanda, I would really appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem.
And I would say that you're still welcome to join the policy committee, even if you were just listening in, it is a public meeting. So,
Okay. I was going to ask you that. So that was great. Thank you.
or it's open to the public, I should say. Okay. Great. Our future meeting, November 3rd. Middletown Springs, assuming things are better, I should say, as far as COVID goes. Board workshop training. Now, last month we had Susan Holston scheduled to come out and to do essential work of Vermont School Board's board workshop, and so I was hoping tonight we could pick a date that she's available, because it doesn't necessarily have to be on a night we have a board meeting. Ooh, I gotta write those dates.
We can send out those dates and do they can just email me back and we can coordinate.
Okay. Find it. Yeah, I hate to schedule dates and stuff like that, though. Let me ask this. Would the board prefer to do a workshop by itself, or would you prefer to try and do it like before a meeting or during a meeting?
We were going to schedule a follow-up also with, and I think that if we can partner those two, that might be the best.
That'd be fantastic.
And these are
Well,
supposed to be in person?
Yeah, if we could we need to do follow-up work with Kathy. And I think if we can partner this up with Kathy, so maybe we can reach out to Kathy, see what dates are, and then we can send out, say, a couple dates to the board, just take a look at. It might be good to have just a separate, night with just this work, and then with Kathy as well. Somewhere we did the past, and
Yeah, and it would probably be looking into November, would be my thought. I think the dates that Susan had were,
October is pretty booked now,
are closing up. So it'd be November. And that's just off the top of my head, but it would be nice to, refine those board goals and start working on the how part of it. So I guess we'll have, Chris will send out like a poll with the dates. So you think that you could try and coordinate with Susan and Kathy to find dates that work
You and I
together?
work together on that, and I'll send out a doodle poll, which basically you'll just click dates are available. So I'll give you a heads up before it comes, just so you don't think it's spam.
Okay, that sounds good to me. I like that idea. That works. But I think the workshop is important, and and then the goal part of it as well. And so any other lawful business? Hearing nothing. Motion to adjourn would be in order.
I'll make that motion.
There's a second.
I'll second.
Motion by Meredith, second by Ryan. Thank you, everyone.